So here is my pink variegated lemon tree that my dad brought me for my birthday. There it is in its pot. And I'm gonna put it in the ground. So let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome to Olive City Homestead. Kim here in Northern California. So today's video is going to be great fun. I'm going to show you how to plant a potted fruit tree. So whether you've never planted any fruit tree ever before, or you've only planted a few bare root fruit trees in the late winter, early spring, or you just want to learn some tips about better planting of fruit trees even though you've done it before, well then this is the video for you. So I'm going to be talking about four main things, and they are the location for your potted fruit tree as it's put into the ground, the hole that you're digging, the actual planting of the tree, and then the finishing up, which encompasses quite a few different things like compost and mulch and more. Along the way, we'll also talk a little bit about root pruning and should you prune afterwards like you do with bare root fruit trees. And also about watering and protection, both from gophers and rabbits as well as from the sun. So come along with me and let me show you how to do this. I have 60 fruit and nut trees in the ground. I won't count my 100 olive trees because I didn't plant those. They're about 100 years old. But I have learned a lot along the way, both in my own experience and over the last 2 to 5 years, and what has come about through the planting of these trees, and also in many lectures I've been to and hands-on workshops I've attended. And I just want to share with you in case you're new to this or just want to learn a little more. This came about, this planting of potted fruit trees, because I had a birthday a few weeks ago. My father was out of town. He paid me a visit a few days ago, and his birthday present for me was, well, 2 potted fruit trees, because he knows how much I love fruit trees, and he also knows I like to try new things. So this right here is something I have seen both online and in person at certain nurseries I've gone to, and I have lusted after it. I have considered getting it, but up to this point I have not, and yet now I have one, and that is, I've got a picture of it right here, a citron tree, or as they're known, a Buddha's hand. Now, a Buddha's hand is called that in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean because the fingers on the fruit that it grows look like the fingers that are depicted in the artwork of Buddha. And basically the fruit, whenever it's used as decor or in foods, as I'll talk about in a second, it signifies happiness and long life in those cultures. And it's a very interesting fruit. It has no meat, no pulp, no seeds, just rind. And it's not, the rind is not bitter like on a lemon. It's actually sweetish, and not Swedish, but sweet-ish. And so it can be used in teas, it can be used to infuse alcohol, it can be shredded, grated, put in salads, it can be made into preserves, and I'm just really looking forward to experimenting with the fruit and also just seeing it, because in real life when you see these things, they're just incredibly interesting. They're about yay big. Well, the ones I saw, there's probably smaller and bigger ones, and so I'm really looking forward to it. The other tree he got me was a version of lemon. You probably can't see the words on there, and they're backwards anyway, but you see the stripes. So this is a Eureka variegated pink lemon. So the lemon flesh is actually pinkish, and the stripes on the lemon and the leaves on the tree are variegated. And so this is a natural mutation in the Eureka Meyer lemon. None of these things are GMO, just natural, and I'm all for that. And so I am going to show you today the actual planting of the pink variegated lemon, because I'm not planting this one for a few days because I'm moving it around my yard. When you get a potted fruit tree, you have the luxury that you don't have with a bare root tree of being able to move it around your yard, your property, and to decide not only where you like the looks of it, but where it is best situated. You're looking for three main things. One, you need to have it in a place where it gets full sun most of the day. Two, it needs to be in a place where you have access to water so you can water it. Third, you want to put it in an area where your soil has good drainage. Now, I do have a bonus tip at the very end of this video that tells you how you can improve your drainage. First of all, how you can test to see if you have satisfactory drainage, and then if you don't, how you can actually improve the structure of your soil to get that drainage where it needs to be. But the best bet is to find soil that already has good drainage, because fruit trees really need that, as well as sun, sun, sun. All right, the first thing that you have to think of when you're planting a fruit tree, whether bare root or potted, is location. Where are you gonna put it? Now, I've decided to put it right here. I had a pot of flowers here, and this is right next to my merit tree collar. There's my chicken coop and my garden, which means I have one of the things you need, access to water. So see, there's a hose right there. The other thing you want for all your fruit trees is full sun. And this spot right here does have full sun. It's about 10 a.m. And this spot gets sun from sunrise until about 6, and that's when this goes in the shade. You might notice there's a little shade being cast by the mums there, but that's easy for me to move. I can move those. However, I believe that once I get it in the ground, the leaves will be above that shade. Now, you can see I've laid the tree down here, and that's because we're having quite a little breezy storm here, and that thing is pretty lightweight and will just blow over, and I don't want it damaged. So, full sun, all fruit trees want full sun. If you put it in partial shade, you will be lucky to get any fruit. Certainly you won't get full production. So really you do want a place with full sun and easy access to water. Especially during the first year, you're going to be watering a lot. In California, it's recommended 5 to 10 gallons a week. Of course, if you're going through heat spells and it's summer when you plant this, it's going to need more water than that. In the rest of the US, and in other countries, if you're not in a super hot zone like I am, zone 9B, where our summers get between 100 and 115 regularly, if you're in a regular mid-level type climate, then you probably will only need 5 gallons of water a week for pretty much any kind of fruit tree. And that will taper off as the tree matures. After the first year, you can water a little less. But with a lot of my fruit trees, which I have about 60 now that are 2 to 4 years old, some of the older ones you can tell don't require nearly as much water as the very young ones, but they still require a lot of water those first several years before they get into full fruit production. And then after that, they require good amount of water during the summer when they're fruiting. So yeah, easy access to water, full sun. What else does the hole need to have? The hole needs to have good drainage. It absolutely must have this because almost no fruit trees like to sit in water. The one I can think of that wouldn't have as much of a problem with it would be figs. And I have several figs that are all doing well, and none of them sit in water, but you know, it's nice to know that they wouldn't mind it too much. But you know, why? What's the necessity? I guess if you had an area where you know, the only spot you had was a little bit too wet, you could try figs there if you really wanted fig trees, which I highly recommend. I love figs. Okay, but all of my area does have good drainage because it's a good mixture of clay and sand and silt, which are the 3 components that go into your soil structure, or tilth as it's called sometimes. Just before we start digging that hole, I wanted to show you this wood chip mulch I have down here. So it's actually about 12 to 18 inches thick, or it was when I put it down. The bottom levels of that have decomposed, have rotted away. So now it's only about 3 to 4 inches thick, depending on what spot you're in. But what I wanted to show you is this. Do you see this component of the mulch? That's pine needles, which is great for citrus. So I'm glad that's mixed in. So this is the kind of wood chip mulch you really want. It is a combination of various parts of the tree. So you've got leaves, pine needles, depending on what kind of trees are being mulched or being chipped, sorry. And you've got the twigs and you've got the big wood, and it's all chipped together. So that's what you want. You want a mixture of all parts of the tree. That's what's going to add great structure to your soil. Now, as the wood chips break down, they leave behind this absolutely gorgeous, rich earth. Or not leave it behind, but actually create it. So that's what I'm going to be planting in. The hole that you're going to plant in should be twice the width of the pot that you got it in. And it should be sort of saucer shaped, and that's what you're going to see here as I dig. And it should only be as deep as the soil in the pot that you've got. So you can see it is just above the top of the shovel there. Now, if anything, you want the root mass, the soil that's in the pot already around your tree, to be just slightly, quarter to half an inch above the level of the soil that you planted in the ground. Just lay that back down there so it doesn't fall and break branches. So it's a myth that it has to be super deep. It does not need to be super deep. It needs to be twice as wide, 2 to 2.5 times as wide as the pot that it came in. However, it does not need to be that deep all the way across the width. It can be saucer shaped. That is probably the best way to go. Okay, the hole is dug, and it's a lot wider than it looks. In fact, I probably dug it too wide, but that's not going to hurt anything. And we're going to put the tree in and then add back in the native soil. One thing I find easy sometimes, especially if I have a lot of mulch down in an area, even though I pull the mulch back, when you're getting down to the dirt where no mulch is in there at all, when you've gone down a bit, I like to kind of put it in a wheelbarrow or something, because that way I can keep it clean of the mulch, and then I'll add that stuff back in. Also, it gives me a better look at the soil, and I can decide whether or not it needs any organic material added to it to improve its structure. Again, we're not going to add any fertilizer. We're going to keep this native, but if the clay and the sand and the silt ratio isn't just right and it feels like it needs to be improved as far as structure goes, then you can add in organic material. One of the best things for doing that would be to add in things like collard leaves, some of your vegetable plants that you're taking down for the fall, that greenery. Adding that down deep in the soil is going to not hurt the plant at all. In fact, it will help the plant as it breaks down over the winter. This is assuming you're planting right about now. But even if you plant in a different time of year, that would be work too, as long as you've got the depth at the right level and you can cut those leaves up. And you can also add some of the wood chips you have. I have a like 10-foot, 15-foot pile of wood chips out front, and if I wanted to get broken down wood chips, I would just dig down a foot or two in there and I'd have perfect organic material to add in here. But this soil looks pretty good. I probably won't add in any organic material, or if I do, it will be out toward the sides. So I've taken it right out of the pot, and you can see the root structure here. It is not root bound. But I'm going to do something here that a lot of people don't do and that you might be scared to do, but it's actually good for fruit trees. And that is, I'm going to score down gently every 2 inches, but this is breaking apart as I just do it gently. And what I'm doing is cutting into some of these roots, and that might look horrible, but actually that's a good thing for your tree. What's going to happen is at each one of these cuts, more and more roots are going to come out to the side. Normally you would break the bottom too, but this one's so soft, so it doesn't need that, and it's going to do great. So I'm going to put it in the hole now. I do not need to line this hole with the hardware cloth, or the gopher wire or chicken wire to prevent gophers, because I don't have any gopher issues back here. But you can do that and should do that if it's in an area where you've had any gopher issues. Okay, for those of you who haven't planted fruit trees before, your fruit trees are going to have a graft union if they've been grafted. And if so, sometimes they're more obvious to see than other times, but If so, you plant them with the graft union, facing to the north or northeast. And that, you may hear or read things that talk about that keeps them out of the north wind, but that's not really the issue. The issue is sun, and this protects them from the intensity of the sun's rays at its most intense. Now, one of the things you want to check as you're filling the soil in is that your tree is standing straight and upright. And as you can see here, this tree is leaning slightly toward the east. So now I know that I will prop it up a little more as I go. Now I'm going to check how it's doing as far as south and north. And that looks really good. Maybe slightly leaning to the south, but no, actually that's more the stake. I'm looking at the trunk is going straight up. So just prop it a little bit here on the east side and it should be great. All right, well, being that I have a predominantly clayish soil here, I have a lot of good minerals in the ground. One thing though that you can do to help out your fruit trees, I do not always do this, but I'm gonna do it today because I thought of it. Monomycorrhizae and the mycorrhizal inoculant that it gives to your plants really helps the roots develop. That's what it does. And so it's a great thing to use very lightly. Just sprinkle it on. I sprinkled it at the bottom of the hole. Now I'm going to sprinkle some around the sides of the roots. And yeah, it can't hurt, can help. So why not? All right, so I'm just sprinkling some around. Along the sides of the roots. And I already did this mostly, but I forgot to show you, so I just added a little bit more on the top of these roots. What about rocks? If you find some rocks in your soil, you know, it does not hurt to have them in the soil. In fact, a few of these are good. They provide some space for the water to drain around. So yeah, don't be worried about sifting out every little rock, okay? That's a good thing actually to have a little bit of that in there. Over time too, the rocks do break down and the rock minerals are good for your soil. So we now have a nice little saucer shaped hole. I don't know if you can see the edges of the saucer, but they go up about 4 to 6 inches all the way around. Now, this will provide a great water basin for the plant, and in the winter, if you're in a place that gets a lot of rain, you would want to fill this in and level it off in the winter so you don't drown your plant. If you're in a dry place like I am, you might not have to do that even in the winter. Hey, take a second, I am, to enjoy how that looks. Gorgeous, isn't it? Really came out nicely. Looks super good there. And I think it's gonna do really well. I'm excited next spring to see fit fruits. Might take another year though to get settled in. We'll see. And the view from the front. I'm not used to this really. I 95% of the time plant bare root fruit trees, which obviously have no leaves, and I do that in the cold of early spring or late winter. And the few times I have potted or used a potted plant, citrus every time, they've been much younger and smaller. So these two that I'm planting right now, today and tomorrow, are much fuller and about a year or two older at least. So looking forward to seeing how this goes, but I'm really pleased with how the planting has gone so far. And now we're going to talk just for a few moments about compost and mulch and why we always take the time to finish off our planting of fruit trees with them and why we don't need to add fertilizer. I'm going to add in now my compost. And this has been broken down here on my property, courtesy of my vegetable plants, my kitchen scraps, and my chickens. Now when I mulch, my sheep will contribute a little bit, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let me just spread this all around. Compost is added. I have about 2 to 4 inches on there. Now I'm going to add the mulch. All right, there we go. That's about 4 inches of mulch, which I've chosen to use straw, which is the remains of well, what's left after my sheep have eaten their hay. They leave the straw on the ground and poop in it. So I've got some sheep droppings in here, which is a coal manure. So it'll enrich the soil, but it's not going to burn the roots. And this mulch you'll see right there is 4 inches away from the trunk. And that is on purpose. In fact, I need to add just a little bit more around the edges, outer edges, but you don't want to crowd the mulch around the trunk because that can lead to a place for pests to hide out and bother the tree. It can lead to bacterial infection due to too much moisture not being able to naturally evaporate. And so yeah, you want to leave about 4 inches away from the trunk of the tree. But mulch is totally going to help your soil retain the water that it gets from either you or the rain, which is really going to help your tree. Especially if you're in a dry area like I am, dry, hot area, you definitely have to be using mulch if you want your tree to do really well. And you don't want to be watering 2 or 3 times a day, which your citrus doesn't need. So yeah, put that mulch on. You can also use pine needles as mulch. Citrus loves that. You can use straw without sheep manure in it. And you can use wood chips. So normally that's what I would use. And in fact, I think I'm going to add a layer of broken down wood chips on top of the straw because we get a lot of wind here and that will keep the straw from blowing away. But tree is looking great. And that's all there is to it. It's simple, it's easy, it's so rewarding. Go plant a fruit tree today. So you don't need to wait till February to plant bare root fruit trees. You can get some potted trees, especially citrus, right now and get them in the ground. Remember, after you get it planted and mulched, 5 to 10 gallons of water a week. Depending on your area. So you can easily find out by looking into your local ag source, your county agricultural department, or if you have a university nearby that has a strong agricultural department, like we have UC Davis down in Sacramento, about 2 hours from here. But in general, 5 to 10 gallons a week. So I'm giving it a thorough watering now. And then with my citrus, I usually water every other day. And a lot of people will tell you you don't need to do that. And maybe when they're much older, I won't. But around here, in the summer, with the heat we have and absolutely no rain, I've found if I don't water at least every other day, my trees suffer, including the citrus. But that's why you have to be observant and listen to your trees, what they're telling you. So here we are again, and I want to talk to you just a little bit about finishing up now. You planted the tree, you have selected the right location, you've dug the hole just right, you've got the tree in the ground, you've got the compost on, you've got the mulch on, you've watered. Now what? What about protection from rabbits, squirrels, anything that might chew on the trunk? Well, then you use hardware cloth in a cylinder around the tree trunk, or you can get what's called a tree wrap, which comes in this tight spiral, but you spread it out and it kind of quickly wraps around the whole trunk. I'm not explaining that very well, but it's actually one long strip in a spiral, and so it protects your tree from both things like rabbits gnawing on it and the sun. The other thing people often use to protect tree trunks from sun is paint. So they'll take interior latex white paint and dilute it 50% with water. And that's what you see on a lot of the trees when you're, say, driving down the main road, the highway. You'll see trees like well, here in Northern California, they might be liquid amber, a type of maple tree, but lots of trees where they will paint the trunks white. That's what it's for, because if you don't in some way, whether with that type of diluted paint or with a wrap of some sort, protect the tree from the intense sun, especially when it's young, when it doesn't have all the branches and the leaves to protect it. And I would say especially so in an environment like mine where we have such hot, intense sun, most months of the year. If you don't protect it, what happens is the trunk will crack. The sunlight will cause the trunk to crack, and if the trunk cracks, you are much more likely to get some kind of infection in it. So you really do need to protect your trunks. And I have, for the most part, done the diluted paint as a protective cover. That's what my dad always did as a landscaper, and so I suppose I just did it by default. I'm now looking into seeing if I can wrap some of my future trees instead, but I have been pleased with the job that the diluted paint has done. I'm just not sure that I want to keep doing that. I have to do a little more research on that. But one way or another, you do need to protect these trunks. Citrus trees are evergreen, and therefore they don't lose their leaves and expose their trunk at any point during the year. The only time I've had an issue with this is when I had a lemon tree out front and the rabbits ate the leaves off. Yeah, they actually did that. Sad. They've never done it to my orange trees out there, but this one lemon tree they did, and I eventually moved it in the backyard, and now it's doing fabulous. I'll give you a shot of that here. So here's the lemon tree today, absolutely packed with lemons. It's just loaded. Very, very healthy. And yeah, after I get the lemons off, I'm definitely going to be pruning back the branches a bit because it's so overgrown, but it happened all at once, and you really don't prune citrus that much, so I let it go. And because it's an older tree, the limbs that are holding the lemons are thick and heavy, and they're actually sturdy enough to hold up all these lemons. But yeah, this was the tree that when I moved it back here didn't have any leaves on it. So when the rabbits had eaten the leaves off of that tree, it left the trunk exposed, of course, and then I did need to protect it, so I did paint that citrus. But most citrus, covered as they are in leaves constantly and many, many branches, because you don't prune them the way you do other fruit trees, though that's another story, they don't need it, but most fruit trees do. Yours might not need it at this moment, because let's say it's not a brand new tree and it's full of leaves, but when it loses its leaves, it's going to be exposed. And maybe you're in an area in the winter where you don't see much sun, but come spring, you're going to probably want to either do the paint, the diluted paint cover, or get a tree wrap. Now, as far as pruning goes, when you plant a bare root fruit tree, you do prune it. Some people would say severely, and we don't need to go over that now, except I will just say you basically cut all the branches off and cut it way down low. It looks pretty horrific if you've never been exposed to that before, but with a potted tree it's completely different. Again, especially with citrus like this, but because it's growing, it's not only evergreen, but it's growing fruit throughout the winter, some citrus for year round. So you're not going to prune this when you plant it. As I showed you when I planted the lemon, you will do a little root pruning if you're wise. You don't have to. I have planted many a tree where I didn't do the root pruning and they did grow, but I have learned in the last couple of years that this practice of root pruning, actually where you score the soil after you take the tree out of the pot, where you score the soil right through some of those roots all the way around, and if it's a real hard, firm soil because it's been in the pot a while, even underneath, score that too, break through some of those roots. That root pruning practice really does help the tree in the long run. You won't necessarily see in the first year any difference at all, or even in the second year any difference at all, but in the long run, I've talked to enough people to know, and the people that I respect in the field, to know that it actually is really good for them. So, but again, you don't have to, that's up to you. Do a little research on it and decide for yourself. All right, I told you that at the end of the video, I was going to give you a bonus tip about drainage, how you can improve drainage in your soil, and a drainage test you can do if you're not sure what kind of drainage you have. So here's the test. You get out there to the spot where you would like to plant your fruit tree, and you dig a hole a foot deep. And then you fill it with water. You go away, come back, after it's all drained, you fill it up again. Okay, so you fill it, let it drain out, fill it up again. Go away for an hour. And when you come back the second time, after 1 hour, if it hasn't drained at least 2 inches, then you've got poor drainage. If it is drained at least 2 inches after an hour, then your drainage is fine. What if you have bad drainage? What can you do to improve it? Now, to improve drainage of your soil, you basically need to improve your soil structure, which is sometimes called tilth. And soil structure is basically how your soil particles clump together, aggregate, group together, and that basically your soil is made up of clay, sand, and silt, and the proportion of those three are what make up a good or bad soil structure. So if you have just the right structure, your drainage would be perfect, but if you have too much sand, you're going to not be able to retain any moisture, and if you have too much clay, you're not going to be able to drain the water. So if your water's not draining, what you want to do is break up that clay, but the way you break it up is not just by digging. No, the way you break it up is by adding organic material. So you want to add finished compost. Preferably compost, you've done yourself. That's great because you are sure of what it is and that it's organic, made from your own spent vegetable material, your own, food scraps, your own chicken manure, that kind of thing. But if not, just make sure you know where you're sourcing your compost from. You don't want to get compost somewhere that has a lot of weed seeds in it or something like that. Not that you can't compost weeds, but if you do, you want to make sure the seeds aren't in it or that you've done a hot compost. That goes into a whole nother topic, so we're not going to get into that. But basically, you want to have finished compost, or you can add, if you're not going to plant right away, if you've got a season before you're going to plant, you can add green material yourself. You can, now's a perfect time if you were going to plant in the spring, whether a bare root or a potted fruit tree. You could be putting all, as I mentioned when I was out planting the lemon tree, you could cut down your collard greens, you could cut down your old tomato plants, your artichoke plants, whatever the case may be, and you can put that all right in the soil. Because if you do that, and then you put, soil on top of it, over the winter with water added, if you don't get any rain, you'll have to add the water yourself. It will break down, and in a season or two at the most, it will be beautiful for planting. But if you put finished compost right into, work it into your clay, then you're going to be ready to plant right away. And then if you follow the practice that I do, which is no dig, no till gardening, what I would do is put in the green stuff, put down soil maybe from another area of my yard on top of that, and some broken down wood chips, which I have in a couple of piles around the property in various stages of breakdown. And I would plant at the top of all of that. And I've had good luck with that with flowers and with vegetables. I've done it actually with a couple of fruit trees. I haven't done it with a potted one, but I think that might work even better because it's already got a root mass and soil around it. Anyway, adding organic material though into hard, thick, sticky clay soil or into sandy soil that won't hold water at all, it works to build the soil structure to make future planting of fruit trees and vegetables and such wonderful. So there she is, my pink variegated lemon tree, looking so pretty as the sun sets this evening. And it was so simple to do, wasn't it? If you enjoyed this video and would like to see others like it with simple gardening ideas and just tips for simple living on your own property, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you'll know whenever I upload new content. Remember, no matter what anyone says, you can create the garden and the life that you want. Dream big and go for it. I think I'm going to pick a lemon or two and make a glass of lemonade. That looks perfectly ripe. And there's a few more like that on here. So my first lemonade from my tree, and that's what it's all about, folks. Homegrown and so good.